Chapter 8, Earth as Planet. We looked at global perspective last week, the shape and size of the Earth, the interior of the Earth, all the layers that make up of the Earth. And we also looked at the surrounding magnetic field of the Earth, which is created by the rotating inner core, which has ions and which act like currents, and moving currents create, or moving charges is what current is, and electric current produces magnetic field around it, and that field is very similar to this bar magnet here. So Earth has this envelope of magnetic field around it, and that magnetic field channels some of these solar particles towards the pole. Some of them get collected in the Van Allen belts, and those charges that are directed towards the pole in the magnetic field ionizes the molecules and atoms of the atmosphere, creating auroras, or the northern and southern lights. And we looked at the Earth's crust in little more detail. All the rocks that are found in the Earth's crust, mostly 3 different types: igneous, sedimentary, and metamorphic rock. The plate tectonics, the roughly 12 different plates of the Earth's crust that sit on top of the mantle. They move, they collide with each other, they grind against each other, or they move away from each other, creating rift zones and subduction zones, creating fault line like this at the rift, the San Andreas fault. These 2 plates are grinding with each other, moving anti-parallel, making the ground very unstable. The reason for California to get hundreds of earthquakes in a year. And at the subduction zone, two plates can collide with each other, one actually entering underneath the other plate, causing the rise in the landmass, which created some of the most highest places on Earth, snow-capped mountains like the Himalayas and the Torre del Paine in the Southern America. And the volcanoes are also responsible for creating a new landmass. The whole Hawaiian Islands were created by volcanoes. It still has some active volcanoes. Sometimes it scares the people living in it. We had active volcanic activity a couple days ago that prompted in the evacuation of the whole town. The volcanoes can be constructive in a sense that they create these landmass as tall as Mount Everest. As a matter of fact, the volcano that rose from the bottom of the Pacific here in the Big Island of Hawaii, it rose from the bottom of the ocean floor and rose as high as where the Mauna Kea at top is, and that height from ocean floor to the top is actually taller than the tallest mountain we have, Mount Everest, and this height is about 9 kilometers. Mount Everest is 8.8 kilometers. And now let's look at the Earth's atmosphere. The structure of the atmosphere, it has layers, different layers. The bottommost is the troposphere, and that's where most of us live all our life, because it extends from sea level to above 10 kilometers. And most of the atmosphere is concentrated within this low troposphere region. we measure our atmospheric pressure in terms of bar, and we define, when we say 1 bar, it's the atmospheric pressure exerted at the sea level. When we drop something, it falls downward because the Earth's gravity is acting on it. Think of it in the same way. All these atmosphere, the atoms and molecules of all the gases that are in the atmosphere, they're being drawn down, they're pulled down by the gravity. And so most of that mass, weight, is around the troposphere region. And so we are constantly being pressed down on top of our head. We're being pressed down by the atmosphere, that weight of the atmosphere. As a matter of fact, there's 1 square centimeter of Earth's surface. We take 1 centimeter square, 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter. It has a weight equivalent to 1 kilograms. We don't feel that weight because we evolved this way. And this is at the sea level. And we're being constantly pressed by the air. But since we are born and grew up this way, we don't feel it. If you go from sea level to very high in the mountains where the air is thin, that atmospheric pressure decreases and we feel the difference. And that's how people get, high altitude sickness, because now there's no more weight on top of each other. Our, head expands a little bit. That causes even the brain to swell out, causing the altitude sickness. I have felt it twice. As a matter of fact, when I was hiking Colorado mountains, I went from Texas, which is about 50 feet from sea level. I went up to 13,000 feet in 2 days. I got that altitude sickness. And so that's troposphere region up to 10 kilometers, and go higher, the stratosphere, where most of the clouds, water vapor are. The cold exits to about 50 kilometers above the surface, so right above the cloud region here. In between the stratosphere and troposphere lies the water molecules and cloud, that region here. Above that is the stratosphere. And you see the temperature scale here. As you go high, the temperature start to decrease up to stratosphere, and at the ozone layer, temperature slightly increases, and it decreases and increases again with height. And the ozone layer is where most of the oxygen is. Ozone is oxygen, O3, 3 molecules of oxygen combined. And that ozone layer helps us to block the sun's ultraviolet. UV radiation is all stopped here. The harmful radiation that can cause skin cancer are stopped here within the ozone layer. And beyond that is the, where am I? This way. Beyond that, above is the mesosphere. Mesosphere is one of the coldest layer of the Earth's atmosphere. And as we go higher from the troposphere, the atmosphere starts to get thin. Number of air molecules decreases because most of them sink towards the surface. And at the mesosphere, temperature gets low. It's 130 degrees below zero. And this is where most of the space rocks, space junk, debris, small satellites, meteorites burn up and avoid from reaching to the surface of the Earth. That's mesosphere. And beyond mesosphere, the highest layer of the atmosphere is the ionosphere. It's called ionosphere because it has ions in it. That's 100 kilometer and high. Atoms get ionized when they lose electrons, and these processes happen here around ionosphere. And beyond this, as you go higher, the gravity decreases. The gravity gets weaker and weaker, and around ionosphere, even atoms are being held. All the atmospheric molecules and atoms are being held down by the gravity, and as you go higher, the gravity gets weaker, and these atoms and electrons can escape because they are no longer bound by the gravitational force, and this is called atmospheric leakage. This had happened in the Mars atmosphere, which has a weak gravity. The gravity was not strong enough, so if any water, ice was there, that melted, forming ice, and melted ice forming water, and that water evaporated, forming clouds. But if there's no strong gravity to hold it together, those atoms and molecules easily escaped from the surface of the Mars, causing a dry place. Same thing could have been happened around the Venus's atmosphere. But on Earth, again, it's strong enough. It doesn't, that leakage is not that massive, yet it is physically possible for these electrons and atoms to escape out from the Earth's gravitational pull. And what constitutes the atmosphere? The Earth's surface, mostly the troposphere region, consists of two main gases: nitrogen, about 78%, and oxygen, about 21%. There are other gases, argon, even water vapor, carbon dioxide, a lot these days. It was less in the past. We have more carbon dioxide now because mostly we use fossil fuel, and it has consequence that we look at in a minute. On a hotter Earth, let's say, if the Earth gets very hot and all of the ocean water starts to vaporize, then all that water molecules is going to rise up, and that can create as much as 300 bars of atmospheric pressure. Right now we have 1 bar at the ocean sea level, but if all the water were to evaporate, now that's adding the mass on the atmosphere, increasing the atmospheric bar. And also the carbon dioxide, right now most of the carbon dioxide are in the sedimentary rocks, the organic materials that have been kept under the Earth's surface, like in the form of coal and other fossil fuels. If they were to be released, that would add another 70 bar of atmospheric pressure. And all these gases, we know now it's very vital to life, especially oxygen. We will not survive more than a minute without oxygen. Where does all this come from? There are 3 different theories. Second and third are mostly accepted. The first one says that all these gases, during the formation of the solar system, from all the gas cloud, the oxygen, was present within this big, huge gas cloud, which started rotating, and a sun was formed at the center of this cloud, and the other materials outside were, coagulated together fused together in a larger pieces that formed planets and moons. And so during that process also formed the atmosphere and the remaining of that gas cloud, which had nitrogen and oxygen, got inside of the Earth's gravity field. And so we have nitrogen and oxygen since the beginning, since the formation of the Earth. And that about 5 billion years, 4.5 to 5 billion years ago. And the other one is, when Earth formed, there was no atmosphere, but the volcanic activities on the Earth released these gases from underneath, and it got trapped within the gravity field of the Earth. That's the second theory of origin of atmosphere. And the third one is the comets and asteroids, the continuous bombardment during the prehistoric time, or during the early stages, during the formation stages of the Earth. There's comets, meteorites, and asteroids. As they continually bombarded the Earth's surface, they brought in all these gases, and formed atmosphere. And again, 2 and 3 are the most widely accepted theory. And now, because we have atmosphere, a mixture of nitrogen, oxygen, and other gases in our troposphere region, we have weather. And also the cause of the weather is the changes in the temperature, short-term temperatures. Yearly, our temperature changes during winter and summer, gets hotter in the winter, certain region, and cooler. And when that, usually you may have noticed during the transition from hot to cold and cold to hot, our weather patterns are severe. We get tornadoes when we go from cold to hot, and we get all these hurricanes when you go from hot weather to cold weather, because the temperature gradient, the temperature changes. Like in Texas, when it's winter, it's cold, so cold air mass is in place, and as it gets hotter, when we move towards summer, so the air mass starts to gets heated, and the heat always travels from hotter area to cooler area. And so in that process, there is a change in temperature, change in pressure, and that causes the atmosphere to move. And sometimes that's how we get these cold fronts, windy winds, and so on. So the weather is a local event, short-term event. It can be 70 degrees today, 90 degrees today, tomorrow it can be 40 degrees, 50 degrees. There's a big fluctuations. It's a short-term event. Now there is climate, which happens, which changes over 10 years, 100 years time frame. Right? So when we say overall temperature of the Earth this year, the average temperature of the Earth this year versus average temperature of the next year, I'm talking average, the overall temperature, may not change, right? And it may change by 0.001 degrees, very, short change. And next year may be short change. But if you look at 100 years, 200 years time scale, that average temperature can be measurable. And that, average, the change in that temperature can have, big consequences, life-threatening consequences. And so here is the climate data. Started in 1880s, and until 1940, this is the change with respect to one specific temperature. I think it's the average between 1951 1980. So 1951 and 1980, all that temperature change was averaged, and with respect to that average, we see how much degree up and down every year, and it remained fairly constant under zero until 1960. However, after 1960, that temperature change every year is constantly rising. So the average temperature of the Earth is in rise since 1960. What happened in 1960? Well, 1960 and onwards, this is the industrial era, where we started digging coal, burning fossil fuel, petrol, gas, and the use of the fossil fuel has caused the rise in the average global temperature. And this is the fact, this is the science. And it's not for, it's not a one data point, so it cannot be a fluke. It's been 60 years, and the trend does not look good. It's going up and up. How does that affect? Well, it affects in a big way. We'll see that in a minute. Under climate change, life, evolution of life. We'll see. We have a general idea that how life evolved on Earth, how life began, or when life began, in what form it was versus what form it is in, and how, as a human, we are affecting that, how our daily activities are affecting all these 4 billion years of evolution. And that's when it is started. So Earth was formed 4.5 billion years ago. Okay. And about 1 billion years later, the first sophisticated microorganism was formed from the amino acids within the water, and these are called stromatolites. These are algae, blue-green algae. Here is a closer look. They are still found in these forms here in the coast of Australia. They formed 3.5 billion years ago in water, and they feed on water, organic chemicals found in the water. Of course, they must have been in vast number. Over time, they have to feed on something, and the organic material they feed on got depleted, and that's what triggered them to move on to the land. And in land, they evolved again to higher order organisms, from single cell to multi-cell. And now they are in the form of all these used animals, humans, birds, plants. The root is the same. How do we know? The study of DNA, the genetic code, the study of the genetic code called genetics or genomics. You can have a separate degree on genetics and genomics if you want to. It's that vast topic. Everyone living on Earth, plant or animal, no matter the size, we share some code, genetic code. in the form of DNA. Genome is a complete map of DNA in our body. It is unique. Your DNA is unique. Everyone's DNA is unique. Yours, plants, microorganisms have unique, but they have some, similarities on the species. So, for example, 99% level, your or human DNA, humans and chimpanzees genomes, the map of DNA, are same at 99% level. At 99.9% level, it's same to Julius Caesar or Marie Curie, lived 100, 400, 500 years ago. So look at the map, very similar. As a matter of fact, a whole tree of life was constructed. Here are all the animals, and we are right now here. Plants, we branch out right at the same point. And so we are animals somehow related to plants at some percentage, to fungi. These are eukarya, multicellular organisms, to archaea, even to bacteria, because it all started at that point when the first microorganism was formed out of amino acid protein cells in the water. So we are all related. How far distant? Well, geologically, in the Earth scale, during this, it started 3.5 billion years ago. That's a large scale in time. Right? So with respect to 3.5 billion years, 100,000 years is a very short time. So in our calendar, we are all humans are, one family, like a minute ago in our cosmic calendar. Remember the first lecture on the cosmic calendar? So plants came first, algae came first, and we should be thankful because they are the one who first created oxygen. During the formation, there were other gases, mostly carbon dioxide. So these plants, what they did, they built up this photosynthesis process. They received sunlight. There was water, and using water and sunlight and other chemicals in the water, they developed this photosynthesis process, way of producing food, where they consume carbon dioxide, sunlight, water, and give up oxygen. And in the process, that process was not enough to create, enough oxygen that we have now, but that process continued for, millions of years, billion of years, and over time, we have accumulated about 20% oxygen now. Okay. And so, basically, animals live on the byproduct of the plants. What if there are no plants? First of all, we are increasing the CO2 output, and we are destroying the plants. So there is imbalance in life. There's only at certain level where plants can, they're balanced, meaning the plants can take certain carbon dioxide, give out oxygen. But if the CO2 output is more than the oxygen output, the carbon dioxide is going to win. The animals will be left without oxygen. And the other bad thing about the carbon dioxide is the greenhouse effect, which causes global warming. How that happens? Pretty simple. When you go to car right now, you parked in the morning, you get inside the morning, it was all right. When you get inside the car, it's hotter than the outside. Why? Because the light, sunlight, which is radiation, can easily enter through the glass. So sunlight enters through the glass, it hits your dashboard seat. So when the dashboard is heated, hotter objects emit infrared radiation, heat, and now that heat cannot escape the glass. That heat is trapped. So your interior of the car is always hot compared to the outside temperature. In the similar fashion, when we produce more carbon dioxide, that gets, in the atmosphere, it forms a layer above our surface, and sun radiation can easily pass through it. It comes down, it heats up the Earth's surface, and now that heat, that infrared radiation, that radiation at night has to escape so that the temperature is unbalanced. But now when we produce more carbon dioxide and block to create that layer which stops the heat from escaping, so the carbon dioxide stops the escape of the excess heat generated by the surface, and so now the internal temperature starts to increase. Look at our carbon dioxide emission for a year. And that started in 1960 with all the industrial revolution of all the coal burning, fossil fuel burning. The CO2 concentration in the atmosphere has increased. And this is measured every year. And remember the earlier temperature rise data I showed right here at 1960, how this is linear, or even not even linear, it's getting exponential now. This exponential increase here started at 1960, and look at the temperature rise from 1960. This is the average temperature of the Earth. And when you look at the graph, it's like 0 to 1 degree centigrade. So the average temperature has increased 1 degree. Why is that a big deal? 1 degree rise may not directly affect humans right now, but if you look at the whole perspective, the whole Earth, that whenever the temperature rises, that temperature is observed by cooler objects, cooler material like water. What's the most abundant on Earth's surface? Water, the ocean. So the ocean is going to absorb that excess heat, even if it's 1 degree hotter. And when ocean absorbs that heat, ocean has these microorganisms that creates more oxygen than we know. And there is a whole ecosystem in the ocean that affects the ground population, ground animals. And the problem is these microorganisms on the ocean surface, millions, billions, trillions of them, for them, that 1 degree, even half a degree rise in temperature is hurting. It's destroying them, it's killing them. And so if this process continues and we have another degree rise, we may not have any ocean creatures in next 100 years. That's why it is very important to avoid putting out these greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And when internal temperature rise, it gets hotter every day. Another bad thing, when temperature rises, most of our water during winter are stored in the form of ice and snow in our polar caps. If our polar caps start to melt, our sea level can rise by 10 meters, more than 10 meters, which will sink most of our islands and all of our coastal cities. Those are man-made changes. And there are some cosmic influence. And they come as meteor, they come as fireball in the sky. Meteor, asteroids. There are some impact crater formed by meteor in Algeria. This is Tunguska explosion here. And this happened above the Earth's surface. And it leveled out the forest hundreds of miles across. This is a crater. There is one similar in Arizona. If you ever travel to Arizona towards Grand Canyon, this is the visiting center. We make a joke that the meteor just missed the visiting center by a few meters. Otherwise, everyone would be dead in the visiting center now. And these are again craters created by meteors. Meteors are small. Meteor craters are small. I mean, they will affect, no doubt. Like, people living around, few miles, 100 miles, could be dead. But it's not a global event. It does not kill everyone on Earth. It does not create a mass extinction. The meteors, this type of meteor crater. But yet, I mean, we try to avoid it. There are people, scientists, students, constantly working. They have a center in Huntsville, Alabama, where people are constantly, looking in the sky, trying to figure out if any such objects are heading our way. If you can know in advance, 3 months, 5 months, 6 months advance, there may be a way to deflect those objects away from the Earth and save lives. You have seen a movie by Bruce Willis. He goes to nuke, bomb incoming asteroids. What is that movie? Armageddon. Well, Bruce Willis cannot play movies anymore, so we cannot send him to, deflect the asteroids. But I'm sure we'll find another way to deflect it. But if we know that in advance, but the problem is that these meteors, these are very sneaky. They're fast, and it's very hard to detect if they are not big enough. Like the one that happened in 2013 in a city above Russia. It was not detected until like 2 hours before. It was too late, but luckily it exploded on the surface, like I think 50 miles above the surface on the atmosphere. 50 miles above it, so atmosphere grabs all of the energy, but the shock wave that came down broke every building glasses in that city. Even the car windows were smashed. If that thing had, not broke apart in the atmosphere and came one piece on the Earth's surface, that would be equivalent of 10 nuclear bombs. That would wipe out the city. And that has happened in the past. We call this the mass extinction. That happened 65 million years ago. Before that, there were mammoths, there were dinosaurs living roaming on the Earth's surface, the biggest creatures on Earth, and an asteroid came in, mass of about 1 trillion ton. It did not disintegrate in the atmosphere. It came down, hit the land and Gulf of Mexico region. This is called Chikulov Crater in the Yucatan Peninsula here. And that wiped out everything. That 1 trillion ton, when it hits, it sends out this fireball, not a small fireball, that these fireballs can reach halfway through the Earth. And the material, the gas, the smoke it sends out, brings out, covers the whole Earth, blocking the sun radiation. So now without sunlight, the plants cannot make food. The plants are dead. Without plants, animals are dead. There is fire. Every forest is on fire on Earth. It was total extinction. Maybe not total, because it's a mass extinction. Some organisms lived. Remember the triumph of cockroach? Did you read that story in high school? The cockroaches were there before dinosaurs, and they're still around. These burrowing creatures that could live under the soil without food and water for days, months, and microorganisms that were on the ocean surface, they survived, and so the evolution was quick after that. Because the process was already there, just bigger creatures, plants and animals died, but that some remnant left which could re-evolve. And so after 65 million years, the life had to restart. The evolution restarted, and we are here. Okay, with that we'll end.